I'd like to tell you a little bit about Jupyter Lab. Jupyter Lab was developed by an open source community, mostly a Python community, to try to make open data standards for interactive computing. They've done this in many languages, actually more than 40 at this point. But for the data science community, which is a subset of the folks that work with this platform, the data science community has settled really upon two primary languages that they do most of their work in, and that's R and Python. And I'm going to show you a lot of the features of Jupyter Lab because it's really convenient to actually do a lot of the interactive computing that folks do when they're doing data science. It's very interactive, it's great to use, and let's get started. When you log into Jupyter Lab, you get this screen right here. On the right-hand side is what's called the launcher. The launcher is pretty much what it sounds like. It allows you to launch all sorts of different activities on the screen. You see they're laid out in terms of the notebooks. These are notebooks that you might have. That'll make a lot more sense when we actually describe in individual notebooks. As you scroll down, you'll see other things like you can launch terminals, you can open a brand new text file or markdown file. These are just launching points to activity with one quick click, and that's all you need. On the left-hand side, what you see is a couple of buttons up here. This is to launch another launcher in case you needed to. You can have more than one launcher, and you can close these out. These open up as tabs. Additionally, we could open up, this is your set of files or folders in this particular case. This is your workspace within GEMS. GEMS is, of course, the larger platform within which Jupyter Lab is working. And you can make a new folder just by hitting this plus folder. And you can call that test, for example, and hit enter. So now I have a new folder called test. Likewise, I can upload things from my desktop. So I can click on this upload icon here. For example, I could import this movie. Anyway. Click on that and upload that movie. That will warn me that this is a large file. Do I really want to upload it? I could, in which case it would go into this test folder. I'll cancel this because that's a particularly large file. So I won't do that. And likewise, if I wanted to refresh the screen, that's what this part is. It's the refresh button. In this particular case, nothing is out of sync, so the refresh doesn't do anything. If that large file had been loading and it wasn't loaded yet and you wanted to see a partial file in there, I could click on that reload button. All right? And then there's various menus here that are actually context dependent. So right now, we're just in a very boring launcher mode, and there's not a whole lot I could do here. So from here, I could also get the same things that we saw this other down here. I could get a new terminal. I could get a notebook. If I did do new terminal, what you would see is if you wanted to write at the command line, I get my prompt and I can list. This is exactly the same listing over here in the not so friendly format that the command line gives you. I can X that out, not worry about it, and move on to other types of things that I might want to do. So you notice that everything here is grayed out. This is grayed out because there's nothing I can do with this context-dependent menu. These are different programming and development environments. For example, Python 3, if I double-click on that, I can write any Python. So print hello world and enter it. And well, it gets what you expect. But notice I've lost my launcher. I can actually launch another launcher just like that. And there's all sorts of other things. Notice there's an R environment, very similar to the Python environment, except that you can do code in R. And it gives you the usual R response. And we can eliminate that. I can discard my changes, no problem. So all these tabs I can create, I can eliminate, and launch another launcher as I need it. And sometimes maybe you might want a terminal. For those of you that are command line savvy and can type in the terminal, you can use Unix commands. Notice that these listing of directories and files is very similar to what you see on the left-hand side. A lot of you will be much more familiar with navigating folders and files by icon, like here. And Jupyter Lab offers you that. You can traverse the directories here just by double-clicking. And pretty much as within any Mac or PC, the environment is much simpler. And you can also actually look at different file types. For example, here is a CSV file. Here's a nice little viewer of CSV files. It looks almost like a spreadsheet browser. Or I could look at if I can program in a shell script, it gives you line numbers and already understands and highlights different commands within the shell script. Likewise, a simple Python program is highlighted differently. Here's hello world again in slightly a different view, not in a notebook, but actually in a script that exists in a file. Likewise, pretty much any type that you're familiar with has its own renderer. For example, PDF files are directly rendered within the PDF viewer over here. So lots and lots of different things that you can see. Let's go and look at specifically at a notebook. Okay? A notebook is actually the cornerstone, as we discussed in the intro, a cornerstone pretty much of data science working within the Jupyter environment. We can go into one of these. So for example, I'll go into this geodata cleaning, and I have what's called IPython Notebook, which was the predecessor. Before it was called Jupyter Lab, they were called IPython Notebooks, but they still have the same suffix here. We'll go ahead and look at one. This is a pretty cool one in that we have little snippets of code. As you can tell, this with the import command, this is Python. As a matter of fact, it tells us this is Python using this particular kernel. It's one that I developed from Python 3 with some geospatial packages already loaded within there so that it knows how to interpret some of the geospatial commands that we have in here. And so as we walk through this notebook, I'm not going to go into great detail, but what I want you to appreciate is that you can edit it as you go along. And for example, maybe I want to change this. I'm just going to say view the data. Fine. So I can hit Command Enter or Control Enter if you're on a PC, and it re-renders the data. I can even change the size of that so I can make it much larger by removing some of those hashes. And now it's a very, very big tag. All right? So lots of stuff I can manipulate. I can rerun individual tools within here. If I want to add a command below this one, I can actually hit plus, and we can add a subtext here. For example, do some initial steps and hit enter. So now I've just created a new line within here. I can create lines of code. And this particular time I forgot. I made a mistake. This was entered as code. That's why it didn't render when I hit Control Enter. I have to actually make sure that it knows what type. So this is Markdown. It shows me the different blue text. That's my little reminder. And I hit Enter, do some initial steps. Likewise, you can go through little bits of code, then what the results are. Think about what this means for your workflows. This means that you can publish and share with other people full workflows going from a start initial data set, so initially taking an input CSV file and rendering them. They were supposed to be all data points on India, but there were some that were in error. This workflow corrected those, found those that were in error, then found what their alternate mapping should be back in India, and then mapped them all back to India. So you could do the same thing with a workflow in Pakistan or in South America, various different places around the world, and just with different input files and different sets. So a very powerful thing, and you can share that with other people. It doesn't just work in Python. I just want to show you quickly that it also works in R. And as I said, nearly 40 languages, but the two main ones that you'll be working with. So here's an example of one that is in R. And you can notice immediately with the syntax that this is R syntax. Again, with the general idea, snippets of code, snippets of Markdown, and ultimately the results of each of those little steps along the way with tables, graphs, you name it, lots of different very interesting data sets.